So, I wanted to make a video on probably one of my current top 3 games of all time, Disco Elysium. However, I've also been doubting my skills a lot lately, and I'm kind of struggling to figure out why. Luckily, though, this weird, strange homeless man behind my local Circle K told me about this little website where I could go ahead and get this really cool beverage that would help me. I think the website was named like Hippo Psychedelics or something. But anyway, I went ahead and got this little medicine. At least I think it's medicine. And after I drink this, I'll apparently be able to hear and understand my own thoughts. As in, they'll be literally personified in a way I can audibly understand them. So, going in. Ooh. Well, man. Did it work? I don't know. Did it? I'm sorry, what? What? We're your own mind. Why do you sound like me? What the fuck?
Fear! I can sense it in you. You're full of fear!
Silence! You will get used to this over time. Okay, Okay. Sire, you seem tired. Is it okay if I perhaps make this intro for you? Why are you calling me sire? Don't worry about it. Now, everybody, follow my script.
I can't wait for you. I can't wait for you. I can't wait for you. I can't wait for you.
Now, with Disco Elysium, one cannot be blamed for not understanding the lore of the world. This is not a game set in a fictional town like, say, Silent Hill, or some alternate timeline of Earth like Wolfenstein. No, this is its own entire world, with its own entire politics.
I'm not just racist. Look, I write books. Huh?
He's not a casual racist, he's a competitive racist.
I'm a professional racist here, detective. And its own entire history, and its own unique thing known as the Pale, which will be the first thing we try to cover. But, like I said, I don't blame you if you missed this. Disco Elysium, although its lore and background is important to the story, I mean, look at the traitor, and also just the state of Revershaw, the game is mostly about trying to solve the murder mystery, figuring out what's going on with Wild's Pine and the harbor, trying to understand Claudia and why she says what she says, with little smaller things mixed in to help kill time, and so the game isn't just one big doom and gloom murder mystery, such as being able to start a dance rave club in an abandoned church, being able to discover a doomed commercial area, but said doomed commercial area was really just full of bad business ideas. And the world beyond Revershaw, although important, kinda just falls into the background, quite literally. It allows the mind to soak in the creativeness of its world. Yeah, it does. But when you really dig into its world and delve into its history, you find what I can only describe as a slightly dysfunctional society, encased in a world that's surrounded by the most strange thing that could be almost considered paranormal. And if we're going to talk about the history of a fictional planet, then we kinda, gotta talk about the planet first. Disco Elysium may be a place very, very similar to Earth, as in literally everything you could find on Earth is also in Elysium, but there is one key thing that separates it from our own world, and that would be the Pale.
There are grey flares and prominences, even arcs above entire isolas. The images are blurry, but if there was a sphere in there, it certainly looks like it fractured a long time ago.
A cold fear seeps into you.
Now, we're starting this video with probably the most complex part of the lore.
The most daunting.
As in, it's barely explained. Most of our info of the Pale comes from one character and a book that only recently was translated into English. What is this book? Wait, aren't you that skill in Disco Elysium that's supposed to connect Harry to the police station? Huh? But you're no cop. Look at yourself. You're overweight, and you have flat feet and a weak eye. Like you could be part of a police station.
You feel a pain inside your chest. It stings. Might be part of your diabetes.
Okay, well, what are you connecting me to? Well, to the viewer, obviously. Well, technically, he can't connect you to what every viewer feels. What do you want to tell me? Simple. I want to know, what is the book? Okay. This said book is in the same universe as Disco Elysium. It goes back between three people's childhood and then them as adults. And when they're adults, it actually takes place long after the events of Disco Elysium. The basic plot is that these three people, back when they were teenagers, hung out with these four sisters and developed a little bit of a relationship with them. However, these said girls went missing. And as we find out through the book, their disappearance is related to the Pale. When the three are older and are meeting up again, they talk about how the four sisters have gone missing. And then they eventually find out that the parents recently got a letter from one of the sisters, saying that she's fine. This sends them on an absolute chase and journey and adventure to try to find out what happened. But as the story goes on, and we kind of find out this is related to the Pale, the sisters have been seemingly forgotten by the world. By the end of the book, even the parents have forgotten about the sisters, their own daughters. The world only knows about them because these three have caused a ruckus on their journey to find out where the sisters are. That's the only reason the world can still barely remember the sisters. But for most people, they just never existed in the first place. Also, near the end of the story, a major person in the government basically decides to kickstart the end of the world. And even with the end of the world, they do not stop. They keep trying to find these four sisters. But overall, it tells us about events that happened before and after the events of Disco Elysium. And all I can say is, without spoiling anything, the world ain't looking too bright. Okay, satisfied now? I prefer a bit more of a detailed explanation. For the love of... But the Pale is, and by all definition, nothing. It is described as not having a color, not having a smell. But in most art, the Pale is often depicted as a white fog, like traveling in a very, very foggy Arctic land. And going off the book, it appears that the Pale consumes things sometimes. And if something is to be consumed by the Pale, there's a chance it can be erased from history and memory. There might be a way to explain this later, but with the info we got now, we can't really do that. But the Pale is this mass in between the insulas. The insulas in Disco Elysium are continents to us, and in between them lies the nothing. Air travel is possible through the Pale, but it's a bit complex. Basically, Pale explorers, people kind of exploring by foot or by boat, will go through the Pale and try to find something in the other side of the Pale. Artwork depicting these workers shows them with a weird device, and according to more official artwork, they use what's called a Pale latitude compressor. In order to allow people to walk and travel through nothing, there needs to be something near you. Things like aircrafts, and these workers use devices that emit radio signals. These radio signals basically force the nothing to become something, albeit not really something, but at least allowing you to travel. If they reach the other side, don't just enter the Pale and die. If there is an Isola and you travel in the right direction via an aircraft, a normal person could travel through the Pale. However, going through the Pale is basically like throwing a dart into nothing and hoping it hits the other side. And initial attempts at exploring the Pale via just boat were often bad. I will go into more detail later, but there was 8 big explorations that occurred before Pale travel was kind of normalized. And out of these 8 expeditions, only 3 returned, but 2 of them, when they did return, had gone insane. As seen through characters like the Pale Driver, when you spend so much time in the Pale, this strange thing occurs. You begin to have the memories of other people from history long before you. When talking to the Pale Driver, she mentions having memories of witnessing the assassination of a very important figure in the history of Disco Elysium. But that event was 300 years ago. And she may look old, but she's not 300. That was a kid joke. I don't know about that. And also, something with the Pale, which is not at all good, but is a commonly accepted fact by people, is that it expands and grows and consumes everything in its path.
Precisely. One of the few measurable effects of the Pale is that it is expanding at an unknown rate. An intuitive conclusion of that development is that one day the Pale will cover everything. But this sort of talk is mostly left to extremists. Most people, and indeed most private and government sector organizations, entire civilizations and religions even, find handy ways to ignore or downplay that knowledge. I suggest you do the same.
Off we go. You see the hanged man's mouth open.
One and all. They say Pale is death, but for the universe.
That is the one thing in the Pale that can truly be measured and understood, is that it grows. And in who knows how much time, the Pale will inevitably consume the entire world. And nothing will be left. Literally. And seemingly, the only way to counter this is music. In the story, it describes a character who is being consumed by the Pale. And around him is speakers playing anodic dance music. And the book mentions how the Pale, for a moment, stops as they sit there listening to the music, but then eventually are consumed by the Pale. And in Disco Elysium, the player is seemingly able to find a part of the Pale inside of a church, and the group of druggy teens making anodic dance music are able to contain the Pale in their music, preventing it from consuming the church and presumably all of Revershaw. Thing is, though, it may not have exactly just been their dance music, because, as we'll learn later on through the historic part of the world, this church that was in Revershaw may have been built to contain the Pale. This said Pale isn't like what we see between insulas. It's not exactly nothing. It's baby Pale. Before Pale becomes actual nothing, it starts out as just strange anomalies some people might notice. As we see in Disco Elysium, the strange anomalies between computers and files being deleted all of a sudden, thus causing a neighboring game development studio to lose all of their files. But eventually, if not contained, this baby Pale will literally just become nothing and consume everything around it. The Pale is often described as, by other characters, this sort of part of the past that's trapped. A good example is in front of the Doomed commercial area, we're able to find buttons to various businesses. One of these businesses is gone. It was consumed by the Pale. But when answering it, you hear the phone call of a woman, and you presume that she is mistaking you for her husband as she starts crying and calling you a different name.
Yes, hello. This is Tricentennial Electric. Have you come to place an order? My God.
The lieutenant exchanges a look with you.
It's you. My God. I didn't think I would hear your voice here.
It's a woman, and she knows you. Your heart beats faster. No, something's wrong here. Are you sure she's talking to you?
But if you call her later on, she just repeats the same thing.
Yes, hello. This is Tricentennial Electric. Have you come to place an order? My God.
Here come the bad vibes again. Relax. Distance yourself from it.
It's you. My God. I didn't think I would hear your voice again.
Wait, is she...
It's a past conversation stuck in the Pale. And in even rarer cases, seemingly somehow show the future. An example of this is seen if you're with Kuno near the end of the game. When Kuno puts his hand on a generator and says, "This shit's cold," your Inland Empire skill, if it's high enough, gets scared and freaks out and says that he was supposed to say something else, but that something intervened. Which this alone implies that some people's minds, if they have the power, can understand the Pale. The Pale is very, very strange. But to reel this back a little bit, why'd you do that with your hands? But, huh? As you said that, you physically leaned back and acted like you were reeling in a fish. I don't know, I just kind of do that a lot. Is there something wrong with it, or? Not at all. It allows you to express yourself. Alright, well, anyway, like I was saying, to try to make this make more sense, and so I'm not overloading you with information on something that isn't even properly explained, the most basic and simple explanation of the Pale that I can give is this. The Pale is a literal embodiment of nothing between the Isolas and the sea. Things that are consumed by the Pale as it grows are basically trapped and stuck on loop, and the only way to see this loop is through radio signals. And there is a lot of hints that narratively this was caused by humanity. Let me explain. At the end of Disco Elysium, if you're able to talk to the Phasmid basically says the Pale is a byproduct of humanity, stating how before humanity came into the picture, no animal, even some of the most ancient ones, remember the Pale. The Pale apparently only appeared when humanity first started to take their steps. And they describe the Pale as almost like a pollution of the human mind.
It is a nervous shadow cast into the world by you, eating away at reality. A great, unnatural territory. Its advent coincides with the arrival of the human mind. You're a violent and irrepressible miracle. The vacuum of cosmos and the stars burning in it are afraid of you. Give me enough time, you will wipe us all out and replace us with nothing. Just by accident. We suspect it will be something like the oxygen holocaust that wiped out anaerobic life 2.6 billion years ago, when organisms first started breathing. Only much worse.
Instead of air, you exhale thoughts. There are no trees that eat thoughts.
So then, this leads to the theorizing part of the Pale, and where many fans have differing views. Some believe the Insulas are not actually land being discovered, but created by humanity. Their own minds creating this place. And the Pale is, by all means, unthought of land, only turned into physical mass, presumably through very, very powerful minds. And oh god.
Choosing to talk about the Pale first was a horrible idea. Why did you think this would be good? You haven't even gotten to talking about politics.
However, it is much easier to talk about events that have already been set in stone than to talk about the speculative and the unconfirmed. This then leads to magpies. This is the nickname for people who can, presumably, their brains so powerful, create the land in the Pale. Things such as art, their love for music, or their love for creativity, and just overall a big imagination is presumably what's letting people create the land via their mind. The Pale is basically the powerful imagination of someone creating land through their mind. This could explain why the Inland Empire skill seems to kind of have that freakout moment, because Harry's imagination, being so high, presuming it's that high, allows his imagination to think about the Pale. And this horrific thing that fucks with the human mind, that is presumably made by the human mind, that shapes the literal world of Disco Elysium, is all but normalized now. The Pale is taught in schools, it's taught by people, and there's books and literature talking about it. Intraphonetics is the study of the Pale, which relies a lot on speculation, much like what I'm doing. Travel through the Pale has become so easy that even the most common person could do it. However, because of the psychological effects of being in nothing, people are only permitted to spend a total of 6 days in the Pale per year. Professionals use something that is named Volta du Mar, and all we know about this process is it's apparently very similar to the process of writing poetry. But with this, professionals who are very good at this skill are able to travel through the Pale much longer than the average normal Joe. Which, must I say, the fit that Pale divers wear, you know, the people that travel and explore, that fit goes so hard. The Pale is such a common and normal thing that there are companies that will put alcohol into the Pale, kind of like what people do with wine in the ocean, because it presumably makes it taste better. Capitalism has managed to find its way into the literal nothing of this universe. I was thinking about saying that. I am your literal thoughts. Shit, you got me there. Now, some of you are probably wondering, if people live on the Isolas, which some of them are in between Pale, how do they communicate? Do they just write letters and send them off? Well, remember when I mentioned radio signals? Placed throughout the Pale are these buoys, and on these buoys are radio frequencies. And basically, in Disco Elysium, technology is able to communicate with each other via radio signals. So if someone lives between Pale and you want to call them, then a radio signal is shot out, the buoys transport this radio signal, and then you talk to that person across the Pale. As a matter of fact, it's actually moving much faster than if you were to just use normal radio signals without the Pale, because of the fact that the radio signal is going through literally nothing. But one side effect of this is that sometimes when you call people, you'll catch conversations or things from the past. And that is exactly what we saw earlier.
Why did you even call? I don't understand. You've been gone for months. I thought you didn't care.
The voice from the intercom doesn't answer, but you can hear her breathing. Wind blows into your microphone again, crackling and echoing in the box. Your hands are getting cold and your breathing becomes visible.
Harry was hearing a phone call from the past that managed to slip through the phone due to the Pale. And just like all the other weird shit with the Pale, this is just normal. People are just like, yeah, you know, I went to go call my uncle and I heard some woman talk about her husband dying, you know, but anyway, I talked to my uncle.
It must be anthroponetic crosstalk, the one you get in radios and long-distance calls. Now it makes sense, with the Pale right on the doorstep.
Incredible. This would also explain why we get it on the police radio all the time.
It's quite common, actually. When the signal gets routed through Pale, all kinds of irregularities take place. You may hear snippets of someone else's conversation, or the voice of your former lover, or an echo of an event that took place 100 years ago. Pale is a shroud of memories, and it doesn't really distinguish to whom those memories belong to. You could hear anything.
This, to me, is the funniest part of the Pale. It's so terrifying, the concept of it. But it's just accepted. People accept that it exists. In a way, it's kind of like how we understand and accept that in a bazillion years the fucking sun will explode.
Looks like we got a nerd over here.
I was just referencing something from the real world.
Well, actually, you got it incorrect. The sun is going to explode in about 5 billion years. Bazillion is just a made-up number you made.
Well, I mean, I could just go back and redo the audio.
No, you're too far in deep. Just stick with it.
Alrighty then. And one last thing about the Pale before we finally wrap up this segment is that you can actually technically see the Pale on the main menu. Let me explain. See, the space between reality and pale is nicknamed the porch collapse. It's where you basically see reality coming out of the pale. And do you know where you can see it? The main menu. Every time you look at that main menu, you're looking at reality spilling out of the pale. But now that we've explained the world of Disco Elysium, I think it's time we actually talk about the insulas. The history, the war, the general dysfunction that humanity has gone through. Alright, I think that's a good day to call it quits.
Well, would you look at that? Now he's giving up.
Who are you?
I'm your ancient reptilian brain. I'm buried far down in that mind of yours. You don't hear me very often, at least like this. You hear me in your own voice.
Why are you talking to me? I'm trying to fucking sleep. There's something in you. Something that won't let you rest. Who the fuck are you? I'm your limbic system. I am part of you as well. But you don't hear me. You hear me even less. In that little lake of yours in your brain, there's doubt.
Spill the beans, Aiden boy. What is that doubt of yours?
I don't know.
But you do! You do know. So why don't you share it with the world?
Okay, Big Whoop, content creator, doubts his skills. I'm not the only one.
That makes you just like them. You're not unique.
What do you mean?
There's a vast sea of people like you. People who are doing what you're doing, but better. Better editing. Better budgets. Some of them even have real-life sets. Where are you making your videos? With some little clips you recorded inside of a free editor.
You don't even purchase your editing software. You just go into full screen on there and start OBS. I'm surprised people haven't noticed, Aiden.
Have none of them noticed you always start with nothing but black? Like what you've seen.
Okay, well, you know, maybe I'm not the best, but like, I mean, I'd like to think I bring something to the table, right?
Look at me, everybody. I'm talking about that Petscop series, but I'm not talking about what everyone else believes. Are you a hipster or something?
Are you using that word right?
You're just a diet creator. That's all you are. And all you ever will.
I mean, like my other content's good.
They give less than a rat's ass about that. They don't give a shit about your crappy stories for little plot holes that you can't even bother animating in your shitty little style.
Beep, beep, beep. The alarm's going off. Time for school.
This is Her Innocence, Dolores Day. The innocence of humanism, internationalism, and the welfare state. Perhaps the most famous human being ever to have lived.
Now, compared to, say, our world, Disco Elysium actually has a lot more recorded history. Whereas the earliest thing of written history for us was about 5,000 years ago, in Disco Elysium, it was 8,000. Which kind of just makes it funny that there's technology we have, like normal computers, that the people of Disco Elysium just don't have. But also, the technology is sometimes a bit more advanced as well. Or as one of my friends described it, the technology in this world is a bit different. But anyway, 8,000 years ago, in the world of Elysium, was the first ever thing of written humanity history. You want to try saying that again? In Disco Elysium, the oldest history in the world dates back to 8,000 years ago. The civilization from 8,000 years ago was known as the Paraconassus, located on an isla of the same name. However, in Disco Elysium, by the time of the game's events, it's no longer named that. It's instead named Muindi, which means that Muindi is where basically humanity started. They had done exploration of the Pale. As humanity began to properly explore, they found signs of other people who had explored the Pale, but there's no one left of the Paraconassus. Think of them like Egyptians to us. They're gone. And it's not known what caused them to disappear, but it's heavily implied the Pale was involved in some way. But from this point forward, we begin proper written human history. And this is where a major part of how the world runs becomes involved. Innocence. The Innocents are people who are extremely important to history, and it is the highest title a human could ever receive. There has been very few of these people in history, with large gaps between discovery of these people. One of the oldest ones was the Paraconassin. They were the ruler and leader of the Paraconassin, and this was before they thought that anything outside the Pale existed. For them, Paraconassin was their home. There was nowhere else in the world. Not much is known about this Innocence, minus that they're presumably male. Also, since they're literally named after their Isola, a lot of other people just call them Pious. I would just be calling them Pious because it's easier, and I don't feel like trying to pronounce Paraconassus. Why can I not say a foreign word to save my life? I am so fucking white. In many religious depictions, Pious is often depicted as a man with liquid gold dripping from his mouth. This was because apparently he shared his wisdom through his words, and thus was just overall a good person at communicating his ideas. They said that he spoke gold. Most of the innocences in this world often have some sort of paranormal description or depiction of them, and in this case, liquid gold out of a mouth. They were also the creator of the concept of God, and equality of men before God. As the first Innocence, he declared that there should be more people like him, and thus he created the Founding Party, or the Holy Party. And ever since then, this party has existed. They're still in business by the events of Disco Elysium. However, they're not the Holy Party, but now are just part of the government. Also, a little fact, the Paraconassin's Isola, Paraconassin, was often described as a super Isola, and it's kind of believed that their Isola used to be much larger, but then the Pale expanded, thus rendering it like the rest, pretty tiny. The next Innocence was Franco Negro. I think I'm pronouncing that right, but also part of me feels like I'm saying the N-word.
So what? Be a man. Say it with your chest out.
I'm sorry, what?
You are technically just pronouncing a name, and it just happens to have a word that sounds like a slur.
Don't be a wuss. Do it.
Calm down. You're just saying a word. You're not trying to call somebody a slur. Franco Negro was the second Innocence.
I don't think you pronounced Innocence right.
Would you shut? He is named the Innocence of Militarism. He kickstarted the idea of the hereditary rule of, if a king dies, then his son would take over. He ended serfdom, allowing farmers to kind of plant wherever they wanted as long as they owned the land themselves. A major idea of his and invention was the idea of inter-isolary money, being what we now know as real, a currency that's taken across the globe, unlike us where we have USD, Euro, pounds. He also created the concept of a nation, and in modern times, he's considered an icon due to his preferred military unit, the Franco-Nigerian Cavalry. By the way, the fit for the cavalry is so fucking badass. It's basically Asian armor, but these people had fucking flintlocks and rifles. I just realized I should have established this long ago. The world of Disco Elysium seems to have grown up technologically faster than its actual development. Basically, imagine if by the time America had its revolution, we had already invented the Honda Civic. The world of Disco Elysium feels like it grew up faster than it could handle. And I think this image of the cavalry portrays that very perfectly, in my opinion. This Asian-inspired armor that you would see knights wear, but these people have flintlocks. Back on the topic of Francon Negro, he also attempted to solve tensions between the bourgeoisie and the aristocrats. He attempted to basically build a unified society in which every man had a place and a mission, but at the same time may rise to nobility provided on the strength of their virtue. Also, apparently when he was ruler, the quality of water was so terrible under his rule that people drank alcohol because it was a more hygienic alternative. When he was ruling, drinking beer was healthier than drinking your tap water. Also, during his reign, the invention of trains occurred. Once again, I just want to point out how fast the world seemed to develop technologically before a proper fucking government. Then, the most important, terrifying, and beautiful of the Innocences, Dolores Day. Dolores Day is by all means the most important, vital, and needed innocence in the world of Elysium. She basically helped the world to develop into what it is now. Dolores Day was introduced to Queen Irene. Dolores Day by this point wasn't actually an Innocence. She was just a very high-ranking woman in the government. She's described as being charming, smart, and a very, very great thinker and artist. She eventually became the Queen's primary advisor, someone that the Queen would seek if they needed help. Dolores Day also advised and began the first ever major voyages into the Pale. Many ships were sent out, however, very few came back. But eventually, new Isolas were discovered. And after these successful voyages, these new Isolas, that didn't have names at this point, were known as the New World. After these first few successful voyages, she was officially considered an Innocence. Upon the Queen hearing that her advisor is now an Innocence, she fainted. And according to witnesses, take this with a grain of salt because this could just be folklore, Dolores Day went to go comfort the Queen as she was passing out. And people said that her lungs started to glow, and that you could see her lungs from under her skin and shirt. This alleged sighting is why in so many religious depictions she's seen with these glowing lungs. She was the Innocence of travel and connecting the world. She was also named the Innocence of the 3 scientific revolutions, of humanism, of internationalism, of terror theory, of welfare state. Like I said, she was very important. She also went ahead and kind of created, well, more kind of built the base for what would later become democracy and institutions. This led to the Moralist International, or as we know them in Disco Elysium, the Moral Intern. Now, at this point, people were starting to disagree with her politically, mainly the Mesk state. Think of Mesk kind of like a state, basically, in the island of Muindi, where this is all kind of going down. They wanted to detach themselves from her, and wanted to resettle somewhere else, upstream of where they live. But Dolores did not let this slide, and used military force, or she called it the Army of Humanity. Now, somebody of this importance needs a secret service to keep them safe, and she had exactly that. But 22 years after she was called an Innocence, she was killed by one of her Secret Service men. He shouted and screamed when he was being prosecuted that she's not human, that she's seen her not breathe for 10 minutes, that she's as warm as a furnace when you touch her, and that half of these ideas that she's thought of, that humanity should have thought of them themselves. She was not meant to think of these ideas. Which leads me to a theory I want to go into at the end of the Innocence section. In order to seek safety, the founding party that had announced her as an Innocence went ahead and fled to the Isola of Sur la Clef, which is still where, to this day in Disco Elysium, where they lie. Looking back, most people consider what she did to the Mesk state to be war crimes. Now, the most recent and last Innocence was Sola. Sola is the only Innocence to have ever resigned from being an Innocence, and because of this is often called the anti-Innocence, but also for a few other reasons. But the main one is that, unlike the prior Innocences, she didn't do anything. All of the others are known for causing or doing something, such as Pius, who created the idea of the Innocences and that people should be treated equal. Franco Negro, who invented international currency, who helped to kind of make military force a bit more stronger. We ignore the drinking water quality. We're just gonna ignore that part. Dolores Day, who basically developed and invented the government and discovered pale travel. And Sola just said, you guys should do things on your own. She eventually decided to retire after a failed assassination attempt. Who was mad at her for not taking his side that he wanted during the revolution. Now, the next Innocence only appears in that book that I mentioned earlier, Saint Miro. Saint Miro is often called the Innocence of Nihilism. He basically believes that humanity is fucked. The Pale was gonna eventually eat us all, and we're stuck in a post-war limbo. We might as well just finish each other off. And he decides to basically nuke Revachol and eventually just kickstarts the entire end of the world. As he does this, the Pale also begins to grow, so, I guess he's getting his wish. We don't get much from him other than during the... Thanks, Mom. We do know that at the least he supported the communist side during the revolution. And, well, the revolution is what we'll talk about next, as it literally reformed how the world runs. But before that, I want to look back at Dolores Day and connect her to some of the stuff I talked about with the Pale for a second.
Boring! Just move on. Don't people want to hear more about this revolution?
What is this revolution? What did it revolutionize? What is it about? You can't just leave people on their seats like that.
Okay, but I want to connect some dots here.
But what is this revolution? You must tell us.
Look, I will. Just shut the fuck up.
You do this a lot with your videos, you know. You'll point out a few things and then loop back when you could have just explained it then.
You're wasting people's time.
No, calm down. Think about it. What about the people who like to listen to this?
Pull that crown off your head and shut up.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, there is seemingly hints that people who are smart enough can imagine the land, and that you can even predict the future if your brain is powerful enough. What if Dolores Day is one of those people? She is often described as somebody who could seemingly predict the future. Perhaps with the fact that she was able to think of the land, that she was able to see the future because of her brain. That's what led her to doing the Pale voyages.
You had a little stutter there.
And because of this, that might be why she was so inhuman to people. Because she could see the future and was able to basically cause the rest of the world to exist in a way. Maybe not the rest of the world, but maybe with a brain so powerful, she created some of the Isulas. Not to mention, and I didn't mention this earlier.
Why do you keep doing this? You keep leading us on, and then reveal another twist, and then lead us on with this.
Look, man, my scripts are nothing but bullet points.
Very unprofessional of you.
Just shut the fuck up and let me speak. During Dolores' reign, as we find out inside of Martinez, is a church built for her, a church to honor her. One of the very few churches that are still intact to honor Dolores. Intact is a loose term, as it is kind of falling apart. But as other characters discuss and theorize, this church might have been built to contain unformed Pale in Martinez. For a human to know this, they have to be beyond intelligent and understand the Pale. And let's be quite honest, probably see the future. The more and more I think about Innocences, I begin to question if Harry is an Innocence. Sure, some of these things that you see and hear from him are dependent on how many skill points you have, but going off the idea that you do encounter them, he encounters so much through just his head. His inland empire warns him about the future. His shiver skill has the city of Revachol speak to him and state that in the future it will be bombed in a war. If the moral intern were to ever discover Harry, he could become the next Innocence. Funny to think this possible Innocence has his origin story down a bottle. But now we've talked about the Innocences. And just to give a brief kind of summary in case this was a bit overloading, Innocences are the most important people in human history, as they literally shape and redefine how the world is ran. Due to these people, insane revelations, discoveries, and the way the world runs have been affected. Things such as the first government, the first religion, the first travel into the Pale is all because of these people. And to this day, there is still a part of the government or the moral intern that searches for these people. But now, let's talk about what happened after the last Innocence, and how the world completely changed.
Desperate to quell the rabble and rousers of the Communard uprising, Frizzle I has taken his worst and most dramatic action yet. He has sent Royal Dragoons on horseback to pacify an angry mob.
During the 8th century of Elysium, a revolution was beginning to brew. It was a lot of conflicts all merging into one major revolution. The main parties in these conflicts were the Communist or Communards, the Moral Intern, and kings and queens that were still around by this point. The revolution itself began in Grad in 02. It was created and started because by this point in time, there was a illness going around. This was known as the Tizarath. I think I'm saying that right. Anyway, this illness basically weakened the government because they weren't prepared for it. And during this, someone decided to go ahead and take advantage. This person was Kraz Maznov. With the government in such a weakened state, he was able to go ahead and overthrow it and basically start the first ever socialist state. And while Maznov was under rule, he was a cruel, cruel leader. He was known for burning churches and putting people from the bourgeoisie into labor camps. Eventually, things got heated politically, and the Moralist Intern, or as we now know them, the Moral Intern, took note. Also during this, some neighboring Isolas began to form an alliance, being Grad, Surliclef, Messinia, Orane, all of them combined to form the Coalition of Nations. The Moral Intern and the Coalition were fighting against the Communists. However, during all of this, the ultra-liberal party decided to go ahead and actually try to help the Communist Party. And from there, a bloody and disgusting and horrid war raged on. A battle with the Coalition and Moral Intern trying to fight the Communist Party and ultra-liberal party. And during this war, a primary location for the Communist Party was actually Revachol. Revachol itself has its own little history. It was ruled by a history of kings. A lot of them were kind of stupid, and a few of them spent their money on purple cocaine. But the very last ruler, Frissel, tried during this war to actually fight against the communists, and basically had his own army. Due to him being king and his family having a bit of a history of being luxurious and spending way more money than they needed to, he gave his soldiers extremely flashy uniforms, which is what we see on Rene when we talk to him, these excessively colorful uniforms worn by the king's men. So now we have the King of Revachol, we have the Coalition of Nations, we have the ultra-liberal, we have the Communist Party. This was a giant war, if you could not tell. I don't think I can get this across because the game itself is set after the war, but this war was basically World War II levels of war. Take a shot every time I just said war there, Jesus Christ. But with Revachol having very, very horrid leaders and an army that was, to be quite honest, not really the most prepared, the communists very quickly took over Revachol. And this was not at all a good thing. You see, Revachol is located near the capital of Elysium, the capital of the world. They have an entire coast bay to watch out for the Navy. And for once in the Phillip family, they went ahead and made a place called the Beachhead, which was just a very good sea fort. So now the communists have taken over Revachol. Are you keeping up with the history lesson here? I hope you are. Now, despite this great victory on the Communist Party wasn't actually doing too well. They were actually losing the war. The coalition was just more powerful. And also during this, the ultra-liberal party realized, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be helping the losing guys, and decided to go ahead and swap teams, now fighting against them. This betrayal granted them lots of wealth, but ultimately meant they had to bend over backwards and listen to the other parties. The coalition, at this point, was winning. And in 08 of the 8th century, they went ahead and gathered some airships. In the airships were bombs. They flew over to Revachol and the Martinez area and bombed it to high hell. Now, an army that's focusing on naval combat is not gonna have a good time when aircraft suddenly show up, and because of this, thousands, maybe even millions, died. 2 years later, after 2 years of bombing and a losing fight, what was left of the people in Revachol finally surrendered. And with this, the Communist Party finally died. But the world at this point was in such a horrid and rotten state. All of the parties that were still alive looked at each other and realized, we can't exactly go through this kind of crap again. So they decided to go ahead and do something that would forever change how the world was run. The Moral Intern and the Coalition of Nations combined into one. And this political party now does not just rule over one Isla. Their political party now rules the entirety of Elysium. That's right, the Moral Intern controls all of Elysium, the entire thing. Now, obviously, not all of the Islas are with them, but a good majority of the big important ones are. Now, one of the first big things the Coalition realized is we gotta set up some type of authority, and basically created the concept of police, or as they named it, citizen militias. Although all we see is the RCM, the Revachol Citizen Militia, there is presumably citizen militias around Elysium. But the RCM has its own special little history, and also is the one we get the most info on. The RCM, no one really knows who actually made it. People don't know if it was the Coalition who formed it, or if it was just the people. However, a lot of people do notice and think that the RCM is kind of a descendant of a citizens militia that the communists ran, thus leading to some conflicting political views on the RCM. Overall, the RCM is kinda not respected. And this is not good because the RCM actually relies on donations to run. Overall, it's heavily stated and implied that the RCM has a lot of structural and ranking issues. A lot of the issues in the RCM come more from the internal structuring than actual political problems. But it don't help when most citizen militias are made by the Coalition, and the people who live in Revachol live in a bombed area because of the Coalition. But from pretty much here on out, what we see of Elysium is just from after the war. So to try to make this history lesson a bit more normal and make some sense, there is a political issue going on in Grad, which caused a man named Mazov to go ahead and kickstart the idea of communism. He was a cruel and horrid ruler, and this eventually sparked a world war. A group of Islas created the Coalition of Nations, and then they combined with the Moral Intern into basically one big agency. During this, the ultra-liberals were helping the Communist Party, and as the war progressed, the Communist Party invaded Revachol. Revachol had its own little army, but they weren't able to withstand the Communist Party. It didn't help that the leaders spent a lot of money on giving them fancy suits and also spending their free time snorting purple cocaine. Eventually, the Communists got a hold of Revachol, and with Revachol's location, it was a very powerful spot for them where the Communists really had a good stranglehold during the war. However, they still ended up losing, and the Liberal Party decided to switch over to the other parties, no longer trying to support the communists. The coalition, wanting to just finally end all of this, gathered up some bombs and bombed Revachol. And then after this, the Communist Party was finally gone, and the coalition became the ruling government body of the entire world. In order to make sure that things would stay mostly stable, they started creating police forces. And one of them that is not really well too funded is the RCM, the one that we see in Elysium. Now, I don't think I'm going to cover the actual events of Elysium.
But then why make this video? Don't you want people to learn about the world of Elysium? A bit strange to talk about Disco Elysium and not even bring up the game.
But I've explained how the world works and how it was made.
But you aren't explaining the beautifulness of its story, of its gameplay, of its dialogue.
Yeah, look, that's real cool. I'm gonna do something I normally don't do in my own Disco Elysium playthroughs and discard that thought.
Do you know how many people you fucking disappointed? Are you hiccuping?
No.
You're gonna cry, aren't you?
Well, look, this entire fucking project, I've had you fucking cunts yelling in my ear.
Us? Who is us? We're your own thoughts. You're the one who thinks it's a bit stupid to not cover Elysium. You're the one who's been criticizing yourself. You're the one doing this.
This is true. We are your own thoughts. We are just what you are thinking.
Somewhere in the back of your mind feels like a forgotten memory. Like you forgot something when talking about this history lesson of yours.
You will probably get somebody in the comments just correcting you.
But how much did you screw up? Is this entire segment fucked?
Okay, I'm taking a break.
A break, you say?
I'm sorry, are you electrochemistry?
Why don't you decompress and enjoy yourself?
I don't do drugs.
But I know what you're addicted to. You know it too. And those private tabs.
Hey, wait, isn't this conversation audible for people watching this?
Okay. Who cares? It helps you feel better, doesn't it? Helps you with your stress. You know I'm not wrong, right? Come on. Just give in. Relax a little.
You have a problem.
He can't hear you. He can only hear me.
Well, at least he'll hear me after the clarity.
Now, the world of Elysium has a fate, according to the books, that will not end well. 22 years later, after the events of Elysium, a new innocence is declared. Saint Miro, the innocence of nihilism. Due to very big political issues going on 22 years later between all of the Isolas, the Isola Mesk, with a command from Saint Miro, goes ahead and nukes Revachol. Not bomb, nuke. This then basically causes every Isola to enter another war. Meanwhile, as this is occurring, the Pale is rapidly expanding. Rapidly. Now, the book itself was definitely set up for a sequel, but
yeah, that's not gonna happen.
But the story basically ends with only one of the guys left in the group going ahead and basically just walking into the Pale. in the hopes that he'll find the one person that is a lead for them. One of his friends just gives up, and the other is arrested. And going off how the book kind of ends, we can just kind of assume that the world is either going to end or have yet another reform. But it begs you to wonder, can the world of Elysium really take anymore? Can Elysium truly recover? Can it truly heal? And even if it did, would the Pale stop that? Well, viewer, what do you think?
Now, check this shit out.
The lieutenant begins to heel kick the church floor with such intensity, it's reasonable to fear he'll kick a hole right through it, causing the floor to crack and the pillars to collapse, bringing the church roof down on all of you.
And with that, we have explained the world of Disco Elysium. Its future does not look bright, and now we understand what's led it to here. It's a world
That's it? That's all there is?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you've yet to talk about the adventures of Harry.
Do you realize how long that would take?
Well then, what else are you even talking about? All you're doing is giving Bookface a hard-on.
I beg your pardon?
That's just too much to cover. The paths branch so much in
But
that
you're
game.
not doing it justice. You're not doing this masterpiece justice. Hasn't it been one of your biggest inspirations lately?
I mean, yeah, it's inspired a few of my stories, and I've tried more abstract art because of it, but...
But that's all you do is stutter. Like a fucking idiot.
I mean, the video's good, right? Like, I think I did a decent job explaining the lore, right?
You did have to re-record many segments due to messed up information or forgetting to share specific things. You also practically made the whole first chapter about the Pale as you were learning about the Pale. That one has the most corrections. People can hear it, you know. The changes in your tone and pitch.
Okay, well, look, this video's getting long enough, alright? I was already pushing my fucking patience with that goddamn Walton Files video.
But look at other people. Other painters and artists, through their words, have told the story of Elysium in much more beautiful ways. You didn't even at all bring up the political themes. The people. The oh-so-tragic people of Rivershaw. The soundtrack. The character portraits and the art style.
The doom and gloom it makes you feel.
The hope at the ending.
People are gonna hate this, Aiden. They've clicked off long before now.
What the fuck am I feeling right now?
A breakdown. You're on the verge of a breakdown.
Well, breakdown's a bit of a strong word.
Shut the fuck up!
Why did I make this video? So many people have done what I'm trying to do way fucking better. They've gone more in depth. They've covered the themes better. They've done so much better than me. Is the intro and outro so bad? I mean, I know people like those, but...
People have done it better. Face it.
But no, I've spent so long on this. I really have.
Are you sure? Are you sure you didn't spend that time indulging in your little hobby?
Okay, yes, I did that way more than I should have, but
you have a problem, you know. You are one of many people covering this game.
What makes you stick out? What makes you just blend in?
I don't know.
Oh, the crying. Boo. Little baby man can't handle this.
I can.
You know this video isn't even going to make any money, right? Your intro alone has snapped any chance of monetization.
You're wasting everyone's time. Even your own.
That's it!
Wait! Stop. Stop, please.
What?
Why do this?
Because I'm fucking nothing on this site. I'm just some guy who talks about things that have been talked about way better by better people with better sets, budgets, better writing.
Okay. And?
Where would I fucking go? What am I supposed to do?
Your fears are more than just in content creation, you know. These stretch out far beyond that. You're afraid you'll be stuck working a 9 to 5, and this will be nothing but a side gig. You're afraid these next big videos might not make it big. You're worried your next original project might not be very well looked upon, or your next analysis. I know what it is, because I am part of you. And yes, many people have covered that topic, but you're you.
What the fuck does that change?
Don't you get it? This is your take, your perspective. And besides, as far as you can remember with your own research before making this, not many people made a video like this, just explaining the world. As a matter of fact, that's why you made this, because you didn't think anyone else did.
Yeah, but they also covered the game. They did way more than me.
But what about people who don't want to learn about just the game? What if they beat it and they're just confused about the world that takes place within it? This may not be a broad video of this game, but you're making a video on it nonetheless. And to make things is already something big. You have many friends of yours that you know who wish to create, but don't, or don't think they have the skills. Anytime you are given a chance in your school to make a video over a PowerPoint, you take that. You create and make things. That alone makes you unique. Creating isn't easy. No, scratch that. Waking up for school isn't easy. No, scratch that. Waking up isn't easy, but you do it. And that's what matters, really. And let's just ignore this. Think about your fans.
Yeah, they're fucking disappointed in this pile of shit.
Like hell. Your Marble Hornets video brought back nostalgic memories for many. Your Walton Files video serves as a good place for people to discuss. You've even seen a few comments saying the Walton Files video is almost a comfort video. You have a comfort video. I know you do. Or your mouthwashing video. People appreciated the fact you didn't censor yourself. Your Ultra Kill video. Many people said it helped them understand its world better. This video right now is just like that. Sure, people have done it better. People will always do things better than you. But if you're gonna do nothing but compare yourself to the greats, then you can never even reach the top. Now, come on. Let's finish this video. For those who are listening to avoid a hard time outside of this video.
For those going on a jog wanting some background noise.
For an artist drawing with this in the background. Yeah, you. I know you're there. How's that little drawing going? For the people watching this in their room. Forget about the money.
The fear sucking.
This video might have a lower chance of being in someone's recommended, but don't let that stop you. Create things because you want to. So, this video is getting quite long, and I think we've talked for long enough.
Yeah, we have.
I handled the intro last time. Want me to handle the outro as well?
That intro was good. Actually, hold on, before that. I want to wrap this video up just a bit nicer. Disco Elysium to me is a game I hold very near and dear to my heart. It has greatly inspired how I write my stories from now on, and believe me, I love to write stories. But oddly enough, it's kind of changed how I look at my own mental health. When I played the game, and Harry's thoughts told him negative things, that people were judging him, that people questioned why he was even there, that people don't respect him, I really related to that a lot. I won't go into depth exactly, but at my school, a lot of people think I'm autistic. I might be. I've never been diagnosed, and to be honest, I wouldn't be shocked if I was diagnosed with it. And sometimes as Harry, it feels like people are just treating you like shit for a reason you don't really know or can understand why. And then just those small little things that keep you going. Like Kim giving you a smile. Kim giving you a pat on the back. Somebody saying you did a good job when trying to help them with something. Somebody thanking you. And for me, those small things are you guys. Seeing a video get a like and view instantly when I publish it, seeing people leave nice comments, or giving actual decent criticism, it's small things, but it does go a long, long way for me. And just those small things help to keep me going. It helps to convince me that the income I get every 4 months is worth it. It helps convince me to keep going and to keep making these videos. It's the reason I haven't deleted this channel or given up on making content. The whole mechanic of it healing your morale is quite real. And sometimes my morale in real life hits 0. And I just kind of question everything. And doubt everything I've done. But there's just small things that help to keep you going. Even if I might be stuck working a 9 to 5 in the future. Even if, with current politics, shit goes to the fucking fan. Even if my YouTube channel fails. I've realized, at least I should enjoy it. Kind of like how in Disco Elysium, the Pale will consume the world, and we know that in 50 years, Rivershaw will be nothing but a pile of rubble. But before that happens, why not just make the most of it? The lead writer, despite the fact he got completely fucked by the publisher, managed to create a story that is horrifically beautiful and horrifically realistic. And you know what? I may not cover the events of Disco Elysium, at least in depth, but I think I got a good way to summarize it. This is where I need you, drama. In the 51st year of the 8th century, inside of Martinez, a city located in the district of Rivershaw, a said district located in the capital city of Lacaille, a drunken man named Harry Dubois wakes up, his memory completely erased. And then he goes out and solves probably one of the biggest cases in his entire life.
I'll blow up into smithereens and spew my tiny symphony all up and down a city street while trying to put my mind at ease, like finishing this melody. This feels like a necessity, so this could be the death of me, or maybe just a better me. Now come in with the timpanis and take a shot of Hennessy. I know I'm not there mentally,